Elite white jock choked the black girl. Her retaliation exposed the whole system. When Brad Whitman's fingers tightened on my collar, the cafeteria went silent, as if every fluorescent bulb above us had dimmed at once. I remember the way his Letterman jacket felt cold and heavy beneath my fingertips, the scrape of his grip against the soft cotton of my Black Lives Matter tee, cutting through the ambient chatter like a guillotine blade. For a heartbeat, I saw the terrified faces around me, phones raised but frozen. I saw Lily's frantic eyes gleaming with unshed tears. I saw Tyler's hand hover over his pocket where he'd slipped the USB drive containing the footage of Brad's earlier harassment. And then, I remembered my father's words, when they grab your collar, you decide if you're a victim or a storm. 3 weeks ago, I was the new kid Aaliyah Johnson, the only dark-skinned girl at Westfield High, dropped off each morning by my mother's hospital-scrubbed hugs. The teachers introduced me with polite smiles that vanished in the halls where whispers trailed me like shadows. In chemistry lab, Brad had shoved me, sending acid sloshing over my notebook. His taunt, maybe stick to your own kind, had been swallowed by the hum of ventilation fans and the silence of my classmates. I cataloged every slip of paper, every sneer, every scent of danger in a battered notebook I carried like body armor. I'm not a fighter by choice. My handkerchief embroidered with my grandmother's initials rests in my pocket as a reminder of home and restraint. But when Brad dropped those lynching photos, my face plastered on charred nooses into my locker, a spark ignited beneath my ribs. The same spark I felt in jiu-jitsu class, at dawn, when my father corrected my stance with gentle urgency. Balance, risk with purpose. Because strength isn't reckless, it's necessary. So here I stood, chest-high heart pounding against my rib cage like an alarm bell, as Brad hissed, "You get up off my seat, or I'll make you." His friends circled a live wire of entitlement, while Lily whispered, "Aaliyah, please just walk away." But I needed more than escape. I needed a reckoning. My grip found the sleeve of his jacket, and in that charged pause, I spotted the twist in his arrogance. He'd leaned in so far that his back was vulnerable. I planted my knee as my hand locked his wrist, a move so fluid it felt like water slipping through his joints. The gasp that rippled through the room was the spark igniting a blaze I couldn't yet contain. Brad hit the floor with a thud that sounded like justice. Phones erupted into motion, Tyler's video, flooding every screen in an instant. Algorithms spared no lag. The cafe's harsh lights flickered back on, revealing more than spilled sandwiches. They revealed the beginning of a movement. People were too stunned to stop. But this was just the opening strike. What happens when the system itself bends to protect its favorite son? And who dares join me in tearing it down? Everyone's eyes locked on me like I'd flipped a switch nobody dared touch until I did. The hall outside the cafeteria throbbed with whispers and staccato footsteps as I walked, every step echoing off the lockers like a heartbeat racing for its life. My wrist stung where Brad's collar had dug in, but that pain was nothing compared to the electric surge of realizing I owned that moment. Phones streamed video feeds in real time, but even as the clips piled up, the school's algorithm tried to bury us, suppressing tags like IFA, Westfield, Justice, throttling views, until only a few hundred classmates could see. Tyler's face went pale when he glanced down at his phone. "They're hiding it," he hissed, thumb hovering over the boost button on the USB drive he'd plugged into his laptop. I nodded, feeling both relief and dread. This fight was bigger than one hallway brawl. The vice principal's office smelled of polished wood and sterile fear. Dr. Hammond's forehead glistened under the fluorescent lights as she rifled through printed screenshots of Lily's video blog updates. Lily, my secret narrator, had captured every flicker of my expression in that charged moment, weaving it into a raw vlog that tugged at the school's conscience. Aaliyah, Dr. Hammond began, voice tight, "You understand? We can't condone violence." Her words floated around me, distant as echoes in an empty gym. I squared my shoulders, clutching my grandmother's embroidered handkerchief in my fist, a fragile symbol of inherited restraint, and the promise I'd made to use force only when I had no choice. I defended myself. I said calm, but unyielding. He assaulted me first. This isn't about revenge, it's about safety. Lily slipped me a USB stick, her fingers brushing mine in a secret pact. Tyler, emboldened by my stance, executed the digital counterstrike. He overrode the throttling code, sending our footage flooding back onto every student's feed. Suddenly, the hall monitors were swamped with notifications. The cafeteria clips hit thousands of views, and whispers turned into shouts of solidarity. She did what we all wanted, but then came the system's real twist. Brad's father, a major donor, threatened to yank funding. The school's PR machine revved up official statements promising investigations and sensitivity training, but also subtle warnings to students not to stir up division. In a closed-door faculty meeting, I heard teachers mutter about protecting the brand and avoiding national headlines. Each word was a slap reminding me how deep the rot went. The school could punish Brad, but could it change the mindset that had protected him for years? Late that night, I sat alone in the empty library, the glow of my laptop illuminating pages from history books about lynchings and civil rights protests. My grandmother's handkerchief lay beside me, torn at the edges but still whole. It wasn't just a memento anymore. It was a banner waiting to be raised. I drafted an email to the school board demanding a public forum, a town hall, where we'd invite parents, teachers, journalists, and yes, Brad's family to face the community's pain and demand real policy change. My fingers hovered above send as the cursor blinked 400 characters, flickering like a second countdown. I inhaled and pressed enter. The send button clicked louder than any gavel. Now there was no turning back, only the raw, open silence that follows a dare laid bare. What would happen when the system itself was summoned to testify? Did you really just summon the entire school board? Mr. Reynolds' voice crackled through the speakerphone, echoing off the kitchen walls as I paced between the refrigerator and the counter. I stopped mid-step, staring down at my trembling hands, clutching the mug my grandmother gifted me, a chipped porcelain cup with her maiden name etched in fading cursive. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Every parent, every administrator, every donor is invited. They all need to see what happens when you throttle the truth. Mom hovered in the doorway, arms folded, her eyes a mix of pride and fear. Aaliyah, you're risking everything, expulsion lawsuits, even your safety. I met her gaze and swallowed the lump in my throat. I know, I whispered, but if I don't risk something, nothing changes. 2 days later, our town hall night unfurled in the school's otherwise sterile auditorium. I stood backstage, heart pounding so loudly, I could swear Brad's face flickered on the exit sign. Lily's vlog camera whirred nearby, capturing every exhale. Tyler tapped my shoulder, USB drive in hand, ready with the hard proof. As we stepped into the glaring lights, I felt the weight of that handkerchief in my pocket, a symbol of generations of women who'd stitched resilience into scraps of fabric. The crowd was a patchwork of faces, anxious parents, in business suits, angry alumni clutching donation pledge, envelopes, curious reporters, balancing microphones, and a smattering of students, my peers, some nodding, some whispering conspiratorially. And at the front, Brad sat stiff as a statue, flanked by his father, Mr. Whitman, whose sharp gaze felt like a spotlight on my worst fears. I cleared my throat, lifted the mic, and every ounce of doubt fled. Thank you for coming, I began, voice crystal clear. Tonight isn't about me. It's about every student whose voice has been silenced. Every moment of harassment dismissed as kids being kids. Every time our school's brand was prioritized over our safety. Murmurs rippled through the hall. I clicked the USB into the speaker system. Lily's raw video footage filled the room. Acid spills, locker insults, that cafeteria chokehold. The screen flickered, then roared into life. Brad's grip tightening on my collar in slow motion. Gasps and outcries followed. Halfway through, the unexpected twist hit the school's network firewall, activated, severing the feed mid-playback. The light snapped off, plunging us into darkness. Panic fluttered in my chest, a physical reminder of how the system could still pull the rug out from under us. Tyler, eyes blazing, yanked the laptop and switched to his personal hotspot. The crowd's phone screens lit up in unison as the video reappeared, streaming straight from his phone. Phones recording screens, a digital rebellion. In that blackout, I realized we weren't just fighting Brad or his father. We were up against an invisible code designed to bury truth. But, as the footage returned, so did the lights, and with them came a ripple of applause that rose louder than any objection. I held up my grandmother's handkerchief, now dirt-smudged and torn. "This," I said, voice thick, "is my banner." The applause cracked like thunder, yet as the echoes faded, I spotted Mr. Whitman's tight-lipped glare and heard a hushed whisper. "They'll sue her next." My pulse thundered. Lawsuits, reprisals, every risk was real, but I'd already decided there was no turning back. The mic slipped from my fingers, and as Lily caught it for me, I knew the fight was far from over. "Did you really think turning off the projector would stop us?" I hissed under my breath as the auditorium lights flickered back on, revealing dozens of phone screens still alive with Tyler's stream. The electric buzz of defiance wrapped around me like armor sharper than any Letterman jacket. In that moment, I felt every ancestor's heartbeat in my veins, reminding me that courage wasn't silent. The next morning, the headline on the school website glared back at me: Aaliyah Johnson's town hall sparks outrage and lawsuit threats. My inbox flooded with anonymous emails promising retribution, rumors of expulsion, and veiled warnings from concerned alumni. But each threat hit my grandmother's handkerchief in my pocket like a drumbeat reverberating the lesson she had sewn into it. Use strength with purpose. I tucked it deeper, a talisman against fear. I strode through the hallway past lockers scrawled with heroin and troublemaker, past posters demanding justice now, plastered beside faded school spirit flyers. Teachers averted their eyes. Parents shuffled mouths agape in the stands at the morning assembly. When I passed, whispers fluttered like anxious birds. "She's pushing too far. She's a martyr." Watch what happens next. They didn't yet see that the real battle wasn't won with a single video. It was in the memory we were engraving into Westfield's walls. My sanctuary became the rooftop at dawn, where I climbed alone to train as I had since 8th grade. The first rays of sun gilded the chain-link fence, turning it into a golden cage, beautiful yet suffocating. I practiced the wrist lock and sweep until sweat blurred my vision. Each strike was a question. Am I doing the right thing? Each block was an answer. Yes, because silence costs more than risk. When my father found me there, he didn't speak. He simply handed me a fresh water bottle and nodded, pride tempered by worry. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that nod heavier than any textbook he'd ever gifted me. Back inside the system's twist, revealed itself the school had quietly reinstated Brad Whitman under a conditional suspension, citing inconclusive evidence in private memos. Parents of his friends rallied while the school board tried to paint me as the aggressor. The message was clear: the rules only applied until the privileged pushed back. My heart thudded, my solitary victory was evaporating. But even as the world tried to rewrite our story, I had Lily's vlogs and Tyler's live streams archived on multiple devices, immune to deletion. I looped a clip of Mr. Whitman's memo on my phone. Maintain order. Prevent further escalation. I posted it to the Westfield United group chat with the caption, "This is your system protecting him. What will you do now?" The reaction was immediate. Hundreds of replies, parents demanding transparency, students pledging support. Standing in the agra of my own making, I realized the fight had shifted. No longer just me versus Brad, it was all of us versus a system that valued reputation over justice. My grandmother's handkerchief burned against my hip, a banner torn but unbroken. I took a deep breath, feeling the silence settle like a canvas. Then with steady fingers, I began drafting the next salvo, a class action petition for policy changes, complete with legal counsel from NAACP allies. The screen glowed with the first line, "We the students of Westfield High demand." The cursor blinked, poised for battle. Are you ready to go to war with your own school? I whispered into the camera, my voice steady, but my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. My grandmother's handkerchief, now tattered and stained, lay draped over my left shoulder like a battle flag, as I stared down the blinking cursor on my petition draft. Outside my bedroom window, the chain-link fence of our backyard caught the last of the dusk light, turning steel coldness into molten gold, beautiful but unyielding, just like the system I was about to challenge. I'd spent the past 48 hours poring over student handbooks, local statutes, and precedents for school board petitions. Tyler had lined up pro bono counsel from the NYCP. Lily had organized our digital signatures into neat chunks for legal review. We weren't just demanding investigations or sensitivity training anymore. Our petition laid out specific policy changes, mandatory bystander intervention workshops, an independent review board for bias complaints, and transparent disciplinary records. Each clause read like a strike against the fortress of indifference that had sheltered Brad Whitman's privileges for too long. Posting the petition felt like launching a missile. Within minutes, our Westfield United Google form had hundreds of student names, then thousands of parent signatures. Social media exploded. Alumni from every graduating class shared our link, local news outlets picked up the story, and community organizations rallied behind our cause. But with visibility came backlash. Anonymous threats crawled into my inbox mess with our money, and Will Bury You and conservative parent groups accused me of weaponizing victimhood. The school board chair publicly denounced the petition as divisive, while Brad's father funneled hush money rumors to local reporters. It was a textbook counteroffensive: protect the institution at any cost and undermine the messengers. Late one night, I found myself back on the rooftop, just me and that fence glowing under the moonlight. I wrapped the handkerchief around my fist and replayed my father's words: balance risk with purpose. The risk had grown menacingly real. Expulsion loomed, legal suits threatened my family's finances, and the emotional toll was crushing. Yet, each time I thought about backing down, I saw the faces of every student too scared to speak up. The freshman who confided her hijab was ridiculed. The quiet boy who was shoved because of his accent. Their courage, silent and trembling, called to mine. The day of the school board hearing arrived in a blur of early morning texts and last-minute rehearsals. I stood behind the lectern in the cavernous, gym-turned council room, the handkerchief pinned to my lapel like a medal. As I adjusted the microphone, parents and board members leaned forward. Brad Whitman sat smugly at the table, with his father, his jaw set like marble. I took a deep breath, exhaled, and lifted my eyes to the assembled room. You invited us here to listen? I began, my voice cutting through the stale air. But tonight, I'm asking you to act. Behind me, a wall-sized projector flickered to life, ready to display months of documented injustice. My pulse thundered, knowing that the next words could either break the system or break me. Don't look away. This is your community you're betraying. My voice cut through the gym's charged hush as I clicked the remote, unleashing slide after slide of video clips, emails, and signed affidavits onto the massive projector screen. Brad Whitman's smug expression dissolved into something else. Uncertainty, fear, when the footage of him mocking Lily's accent, shoving a freshman against the lockers, and then grabbing my collar, played in stark, unfiltered clarity. The bleachers trembled with gasps and murmurs. For the first time, the invisible threads of privilege that had bound him snapped into view for everyone to see. As the last clip faded, I felt my grandmother's handkerchief throbbing against my chest, like a heartbeat of protest. The board members shifted uncomfortably. One cleared her throat, another scribbled furiously. I pressed on, my words measured but relentless. These aren't isolated incidents. They're a pattern enabled by silence and complicity. You can't claim to protect children while shielding bullies. The irony hung heavy in the air. A school designed to nurture was being used to shield cruelty. Then came the twist no one expected. Instead of the curt dismissals I'd rehearsed for the school lawyer, hesitated. We have to consider... she began, her voice wavering under the weight of evidence. Brad's father, sitting stoic beside him, leaned forward and whispered something urgent into his son's ear. I noted the slight tremor in Brad's jaw, a crack in his impenetrable facade. The same kid who'd once stood untouchable in the cafeteria was now a boy reading the writing on the wall. Suddenly, the room exploded with applause, not from my allies, but from parents I'd never met whose children had been hurt in their own ways. They rose, voices overlapping. "Thank you for speaking. We were scared. We believe you." I held the mic tight, fighting the flutter of disbelief in my stomach. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. And yet, the battle was far from over. The board chair cleared her throat again, regaining control. "Your petition has merit," she announced, voice heavy, "but we must follow due process." She outlined a painfully slow timeline: committees, subcommittees, policy drafts, pilot programs, essentially months of bureaucracy before any real change. The hollow promise resonated like nails on a chalkboard to my core. Packing up my laptop afterwards, I felt the pull of frustration and the glow of small victory intertwined. Tyler shot me a thumbs up. Lily's eyes were bright with unshed tears of relief. But as I slipped the handkerchief back into my pocket, its frayed edges whispered, "Truth, revolutions aren't won in a single night. They're stitched together, patch by patch, stitch by stubborn stitch." Walking back through the corridor, past posters, now emblazoned with "We demand accountability," I realized that the system had granted us a foothold, but clinging to it would require more than speeches and petitions. It would demand everyday courage from every corner of Westfield High. And I knew that the hardest part lay ahead, turning this momentum into real, irreversible change. Here's the truth they don't want you to hear. Standing up is just the beginning. I whispered this into my vlogging camera from my dorm room at Howard University, the city skyline glowing behind me like embers of possibility. A week ago, I stood in that gym lectern with a battered handkerchief pinned to my jacket. Tonight, I'm surrounded by textbooks and care packages, but the struggle feels as immediate as ever. When the school board promised due process after our town hall confrontation, I knew delays and empty rhetoric were their favorite weapons. They'd given us a foot in the door, but that door was heavy, and they'd locked the hinges. Yet, here I am, rebuilding momentum on a larger stage. Last month, I flew to Dallas to speak at the National Educators Conference on bullying and systemic bias. The organizer introduced me as the Westfield student who flipped the script on school policy, igniting the crowd into a standing ovation I could feel in my bones. I shared footage of Tyler's live stream, Lily's intimate vlogs, and behind-the-scenes clips of phone trees and community meetups. But the real power came when I aired a raw clip of that rooftop training at sunrise. My silhouette against a chain-link fence, bathed in golden light, practicing a wrist lock until sweat blurred my vision. It wasn't about violence. It was a symbol of refusal. Refusal to be caged by fear. After the keynote teachers approached me with tears in their eyes, apologizing for inaction. Administrators asked for consulting sessions. A principal from a Detroit school said, "Your model gave us the courage to launch our own student-led policy review." But social media trolls surfaced too, accusing me of seizing the spotlight and teaching kids to fight. Their comments cut deep, challenging my motives and making me question whether I'd become the villain in someone else's story. In those moments, I hugged my grandmother's handkerchief and remembered her words, "Strength with purpose." If purpose meant wading through mud to get to solid ground, then I'd wade. Back in my Howard dorm, I see a fresh batch of messages from Aaliyah High in Texas, the girl whose defense inspired Deshaun's intervention. She's organizing her own town hall there, and she asked if I'd mentor her online. I watched her first video shaky, but determined, as she described her cafeteria humiliation. I left a comment, "Don't underestimate yourself. Document everything. When they grab your collar, you become the storm." Then I texted Lily and Tyler. "We're in this together, coast to coast." But as I closed my laptop, a new email notification blinked, an invitation from the U.S. Department of Education to join a task force on school safety. My chest tightened. This is the realm of policy law, lobbying territory I hadn't fully navigated. The risk, getting swallowed by bureaucracy, losing the raw human urgency that fueled Westfield's revolution. Yet, the opportunity gleamed like that rooftop sunrise, a chance to turn patchwork victories into nationwide safeguards. I folded the handkerchief one last time and tucked it into my pocket. The battle was no longer confined to hallways or gym floors. It had reached the corridors of power. And now, standing at this crossroads, I realized that every choice from here would echo far beyond me, shaping what justice truly looks like in schools everywhere. Do you ever wonder what happens when the fight you started becomes bigger than you? I asked the camera from my childhood bedroom, the walls now covered in newspaper clippings, and hand-lettered signs from rallies past. My grandmother's handkerchief finally mended at the edges, draped across my desk like a sacred relic, its faded stitches tracing the journey from that cafeteria to this very moment. Outside, the dusk sky over Baltimore bled purple and gold, mirroring the bruises I used to worry about, but learned to wear as marks of victory. It's been 2 years since I first stood up to Brad Whitman, 2 years of petition drives, conferences, and heartbreak as the system clawed back. After joining the Department of Education task force, I realized that policy isn't a sprint, it's a marathon through quicksand. I poured my afternoons into drafting federal guidelines for mandatory transparency in school disciplinary actions, pushing to make video evidence admissible in every district. But, as I watched my proposals stall in committee meetings, I felt the same gut clench I had when the school board promised due process, but delivered months of delay. Policy people spoke in spreadsheets and timelines. I remembered the raw power of a single video clip snapped from a student's phone. That tension came to a head last month when I returned to Westfield High as a keynote speaker for their Martin Luther King Day assembly. Walking past the trophy cases, I saw the handkerchief pinned behind glass, once an illicit banner, now displayed like a trophy of reform. It glowed beneath the spotlights, a reminder that symbols can shift from outrage to inspiration if we refuse to let them fade. I stepped onto the stage, the room electric with anticipation. My speech wasn't about policy or lawsuits. It was about the heart. How courage is an everyday commitment, not a headline. I spoke of Lily's vlogs, Tyler's live stream, and how a freshman in Texas used those same lessons to protect herself. I told them that real change demands a village, not a lone hero. Afterward, a freshman girl approached me, eyes wide. She clutched a folded handkerchief identical to mine, sewn by her own grandmother. "I'm scared," she whispered, "but I want to be ready." My chest ached with recognition. I knelt, pressing the handkerchief into her trembling hands. "This is your banner now," I said, voice soft but resolute. "Carry it forward." As she walked away, the auditorium doors opened to a cascade of snow swirling like confetti. It felt like the sky itself applauding. Back in my dorm that night, I replayed her steps in my mind. The fight I sparked now lived in others, their voices ringing louder than any policy memo. And while the work ahead still lay tangled in bureaucracy and backlash, I understood that victory isn't a destination, but a relay. I folded my grandmother's handkerchief into my pocket and stepped outside, snowflakes melting against my skin. The cold bit like a reminder justice is never comfortable, and it never ends. But as I looked at the footprints I left behind, and those starting beside me, I realized the next chapter was already being written, and that thought more than any trophy or speech filled me with hope.